welcome to another episode of Inside the Message. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah,
Actually, we have 2 more days left.
Yeah.
This will be airing on the eve of New Year's Eve.
The eve of New Year's Eve.
Yeah, so New Year's Eve squared.
So tomorrow night will be New Year's Eve.
Right.
So to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This will be our last Inside the Message in 2020, our year that we've launched True Thought Spiritual Community. We're so very grateful that you've joined us this year, that you've been a part of what is emerging, and also a part of the vision that pulls us forward for 2021. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, I want to say thank you, Brother T, for an amazing message on universal consciousness.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I could tell.
Enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. I appreciate who you are as a teacher. And so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom in your unique way that you do. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask or bring as a start to our conversation as we close 2020, you know, there's something that you brought up about something that was really promoted and prevalent in 2020. And do you recall what that was from your conversation?
Yeah, we were talking about false evidence appearing real.
Right. Fear.
Fear. Yeah,
fear. So you were talking about the promotion of fear. I've heard even some talk about the weaponization of fear.
Oh, absolutely.
And so can you share with us why it is that you brought that up in the conversation?
Well, the main point of it is that as we begin to traverse a spiritual pathway, and we are, and we've been talking about the levels of consciousness, ultimately we have to leave fear behind completely. And the primary reason is because fear is the foundation for the egoic thought system. The whole foundation is really built on, I like to say it in terms of, it's built on a coin, okay? There's 2 sides to that coin. One side is guilt and the other side is fear, and they go hand in hand. So wherever you're experiencing fear, there is an element of guilt involved, okay? Because what it is a reenactment of the idea that we've actually done something wrong, that we've separated ourselves from God, you know, and that reenactment of that attempt or that game or that dream of, you know, is it possible to be separate from our source? And that, of course, is impossible. You know, one of the tenets that we talk about is that ideas leave not their source, and you and I and you, or we are all ideas of love, okay, extensions of love, ideas of love within the mind of God. And we cannot leave that mind. That is our source, that is our creator. But we're having an experience here that is kind of a pretense that it was possible for us to be separated to begin with. But once that happened, once we began to imagine that we could be separated, the first thing we experienced, according to Jesus's teaching of late, of late being within the last 100 years, that we began to experience something we'd never experienced before, and that was fear and guilt.
Okay. So when you say reenactment, we might even say the reenactment of the fall.
The fall, yeah.
Or the reenactment of being booted from
the Garden of Eden. Yes.
And so you might then say that everything that we are doing is a side effect of that original, not original sin, but the original guilt and then the fear that it produces.
Right. And you talked about weaponizing fear, and I'm smiling a little bit as we're having this conversation because unfortunately, that's exactly what some religions have done. They have weaponized the idea that we fell from grace and that we were booted from heaven, from the Garden of Eden. And nothing could be further from the truth. You know, when you lay down and go to sleep, you're not booted from this reality. You're safe at home in bed, right? You're in the other room, it's safe at home in bed, and you weren't kicked out of this experience, but you have a dream all night long, and you don't even realize who where you really are, what your life is about, you know, that you're safe at home in bed. So that's kind of like what we're experienced or have experienced in this idea of a fall. But see, it's impossible for us to fail. It's impossible for us to have a fall. right?
Well,
Or
it sure
falling
feels
out.
like I can fail, and it sure feels like I can fall.
Right, but when you're
So,
sleeping at night and
yeah.
you start remembering your dreams, you don't remember when your dreams begin. You don't remember how you got in that dimension. You just assume that you're still living your life normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't feel like you're safe at home in bed. It feels like you're just living your life and you're having a different kind of experience in it. And you still have a body and you still have forms or experiences of form. So it's kind of like that.
So the basis of how you bring forth the teaching then becomes that our life as we are experiencing it is like a dream.
Very much so.
And therefore, since it's like a dream, so the Buddha says, oh, I'm the dreamer of the dream. And then what's very popular is we want to wake up. And so it really isn't that far-fetched then to regard our lived experience and how we're living our life as having that remembrance of the observer mind. Oh, okay, what I'm observing, what I'm experiencing is the outpicturing of my thought, the outpicturing of the dream.
Right.
And so that's really helpful. So the weaponization of fear then, or the promotion of fear, I have believed has been escalating in our culture and in our society. And so we've seen that in the past year, for sure.
Absolutely.
And that how does that play at keeping us separate from one another and really distracted from why we're here?
Well, we have to take a little bit of a leap of faith, if you will, or to allow ourselves to maybe think outside the box. But as I said, over the last 100 years, Jesus has been channeling, communicating more and more teachings, but other enlightened ascended masters have as well. So if we can accept that we can be communicated to from beyond the veil, from beyond the physical realm, right, from beyond the sleeping mind, and another example of that is you're sound asleep and somebody starts talking to you, right? You'll incorporate that conversation into your dream until you wake up from the dream. You can be communicated to in a state of sleep from somebody that's not in the dream with you. Right. So it's kind of like that. But the point is that if we can accept that, then we begin to understand, that we have been shifting. Consciousness has been beginning to shift quite rapidly now. And especially since the harmonic conversion in 1987. And so some of these teachings that are coming from beyond the veil are telling us that, that we are accelerating in consciousness. We're ascending in consciousness as a mass consciousness globally. Right? As the human race, if you will. And because of that, we're leaving behind some of these old ideas. So if we could imagine that everyone in the world, all 7 billion of us, suddenly became enlightened, and then and there was no one left that was dreaming a dream of separation, we would be kind of having a lucid experience in form. We would be, as Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. He was the expression of the awakened mind in form, right? What would happen to the ego thought system? Well, it would be gone. So it doesn't want to be gone. It's trying to hold on, right? So what we're really experiencing here is the grasping and clinging of the old way of thinking. It's a thought system, the old way of being, and it's trying to hold on. And the only way it can hold on is to keep us distracted from the energy that's evolving now, a conscious evolution of energy. And it's distracting by keeping us in the lower energies levels, which is where fear resides. As we evolve consciously, we step away further and further from those lower energies.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so you also talked about the idea that you listed the challenges that we have faced in 2020. To include the coronavirus, to include political and economic unrest, and that on top of what we experience in the human experience anyway, which is perhaps, shifts and changes in relationships and jobs, individuals, shuffling off the mortal coil and dying, the
health and all that.
Health and all of those challenges. And you ask the question, you pose that as these fears arise in our lives, that they become opportunities for to learn something about ourselves. And so you asked the question, I want to ask it to our audience just to kind of pin this question for our conversation that will follow this on our Zoom, but also just for reflection. What have you learned in 2020 as a result of the challenges? Yeah. Well, it was your question.
Yeah, it is a very good question. And I've been asking myself that. And in fact, you and I have had that conversation a couple of times, right? Because 2020 was such an exceptional year in regards to what we had gotten comfortable with as being the norm. There's always been little shifts, a job change here, move across to another state for a job typically, or a family member, a joining of family, becoming family, or families dissolving, divorce and things like that, or transition out of the physical coil of, physical being. But those, we kind of had gotten into a level of normality. And also there had been, I believe, quite a bit of a sense of safety with our economic environment. Our economy seemed to be growing. We seemed to be, something to be reckoned with on the world stage, economically. People were prospering and so forth. And now I heard something about, tens of millions of people now currently unemployed. We haven't experienced that now for about 100 years, about 90 years ago in the Great Depression.
So what have you learned? Rather than being global, what have you learned in 2020 about yourself?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but because of our ministry and your involvement in our ministry, and we feel a need for this truth to be revealed and spoken about more frequently and maybe more openly, that God didn't put us here. We weren't kicked out of heaven or the Garden of Eden. We haven't sinned. We're not guilty of anything. We're not going to be punished. God doesn't, judge us or any of those kinds of constructs that we've dealt with in the past. This is really an amazing time where minds are starting to open up. Is it possible, for me to know a little bit more about myself? Why did I come here? Yes, we chose to be here. We weren't put here. We chose to be here. And so as we entertain some of those little bit more radical ideas, it begins to challenge the way we've been interacting in the world. And so 2020 kind of put that on, as a catalyst to make that happen much faster. People lost work, relationships were strained, people were isolated from their normal activities. Businesses were failing and closing. And so this year, we kind of had to deal with life as it came to us. And we can't really say, well, I just can't deal with it anymore because, tomorrow you're going to wake up and you need to eat, you need to survive, and we still need to do the things that we normally have been doing. But suddenly, once we got past the transformation of that idea of the way things are supposed to be, I think a lot of people have begun to look inward and look at their spiritual life. They've had more time to do so, and have also become more involved in nature and become more involved in the family members that they did have experience and exposure to, right? So the isolation was also new and informative and a learning time for us. And so we've also then unlearning some
So that
things.
was my next question. So we talked about what have you learned about yourself, and then you mentioned unlearning. So what is that seems so counterintuitive. We're always trying to gather information to learn. Why is unlearning important?
Because we have been very, very conditioned about the requirements to be in human form, to be an ego, to a personality, a persona, to exist in the world as a human and to interact with other humans. Then the foundation for that thought system, okay, and so what we want to share is that there's basically two thought systems. We talked about it this year. But one of those is the thought system of the separated egoic mind, right? And we're all sharing in that thought system. And that thought system has been teaching continuously for we'll say for decades, but we could say for lifetimes, that it's a reality. That is our reality, right? And some people even question that there's no such thing as any reality outside of that construct, right? That's what reality really is. So in order to transcend into beginning to understand a different thought system, we have to begin to unlearn the thought system of fear. And so if something comes up, we could ask the question, and you've told a story in one of your inspirational messages about some guru master or whatever, but this master, people would come to him and say, and his son broke his leg, and people would come and said, "Oh, that's terrible," and he said, "Well, maybe not." Mm-hmm. And then all the other young men in the community were subscribed and had to go to war, and his son didn't because he had a broken leg. And some people said, "Well, you're really lucky. Your son was really lucky." And he said, "Well, maybe he wasn't, whatever." Mm-hmm. So we go through life and we can give everything all the meaning that it has, or we can withhold that meaning, that judgment. And we can say, wow, we can approach everything with the curiosity of a child and say, wow, isn't this interesting? Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting that we still don't know who our president is in some corners of the world, are still not sure. It's not really been totally officially announced, or maybe it has. I don't know. I don't follow the media that much. But we still don't know, when are we going to recover from the COVID-19 experience, and when's everybody going to get vaccinated, and blah, 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 blah. And right, we've got all of these supposed to be's and fearful situations, but we, as enlightened masters that we are, light workers, having this truth, revealed to us that we are the creators of our experience, we can sit back and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to create any more fear today. I'm going to look at that and say, that's interesting, and then I'm going to sit down and enjoy my breakfast with you, right? Mm. Or enjoy the sun, or enjoy the sunset, or enjoy what's going on, because there are gifts that are given to everyone every day and that often go unnoticed. But those are the gifts of love. Those are the gifts of creation. And we can now take the time to begin to not only recognize those gifts, but to respond to them with appreciation.
Gotcha.
And that's moving now into a different thought system.
So then the unlearning of a thought system is to withhold judgment.
Absolutely.
It's to withhold giving meaning, to think that we know what something actually means.
Because obviously we don't.
Right.
If you've been surprised by anything this year, there's your clear evidence. We have no idea what's going to happen next.
Right. So one of the keys that Brother T brought forward is the way to have a 2021, everybody just assumes, once the calendar changes to January 1st, 2021, everything's going to be okay. It's like, gosh, I can't wait for 2020 to be over. And our experience would tell us that the more things change, the more the date changes, the more things stay the same, unless we're willing to learn a new thought system, unlearn an old thought system.
Right.
And the key to that is what? You shared this in your...
Well, the key to that, I think, is that to just remember that we're existing in a state of duality.
Well, the key that you said, I'll tell you what you shared. Okay. So this is what you said, and I thought it was really good and really profound, is he said, is to withhold judgment.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Is to withhold judgment.
In the new year.
In the new year. Mm-hmm. To ask the question, where am I judging? Mm-hmm. Where am I withholding judgment? Where am I practicing forgiveness? And so that the key to a 2021 that is
much more joyful,
different, less fearful, like leaving fear, moving into that joy, into that peace, is to begin to practice releasing judgment and just catching ourselves in that moment. And so I really appreciate that you said that, because it is truly simple. And that we don't do that alone, that we have an awakened aspect of mind. Some call it Holy Spirit. Some call it the divine mind. And you brought in a term, some call it Christ consciousness, that we can pause and ask what the truth is of that higher mind. And you refer to it as the mystical level of consciousness, and introduce the term universal consciousness. Right. Do you want to share anything about that?
Well, I did share about it, and I don't want to get too deep into that.
Sure.
But I will tell you where it came from. It came from Jesus, right? In one of his latest teachings, which was A Course of Love. And that was communicated by the first receiver of that, the channel of that, was Marie Perron. And the book is available on Amazon or whatever, and it's 3 books, kind of like Course in Miracles. It's 3
really
books.
Good.
Oh, it's amazing, but it's kind of like Course in Miracles Part 2.
Yes.
But what I was getting as you were, posing the question to me, I was getting this idea of just sharing a little bit of a metaphor, which is, have you ever smoked cigarettes? Right?
Never.
Yeah, never. I'm not sure I believe that. So, but if you've ever
there
tried,
might be some evidence out there.
if you've ever tried to quit smoking, right? It was good to have somebody that was keeping you accountable. Right?
Yes.
Right. So in my case, it was my brother, because we basically had a bet.
Yeah.
Right. And it was pretty substantial. Right. So it's still active. So if I were to smoke a cigarette today, it would cost me a lot of money, and I'm just not going to do it. Right?
Because you're coin operated.
Because I'm coin operated. That's right. But if we're going to say now, if I want to go through, to begin to see and experience more joy, love, and abundance in my life in 2021, then I want to practice withholding judgment. That'll do the trick. That's the trick, right? And practice by withholding judgment, I'm actually exercising something else that's very powerful. It's actually a part of what we might call forgiveness, right? Returning to, before we give judgment or withholding judgment, that's seeing the innocence in all things that act or acting out, right? And I think it's great to have a partner, right? So that's part of our relationship, as we call it a holy relationship, but that's part of our agreement, is like to catch each other. So if I'm being really judgy, she'll call me out. She'll say, you're being really judgy right now. And then, and because sometimes I forget. It's like I'm fixing to light that cigarette up, and you're going, no. You don't need to be lighting a cigarette right now. So we can do that for each other.
Yes.
Right? And if we can help each other to, overcome patterns and habits, it's good to have an accountability partner. So look for an accountability partner for 2021 if you don't already have one.
And we can be accountability partners for one another in
our community,
our spiritual community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think that's really great.
And it's not to blame or make somebody feel guilty. It's just a gentle, loving reminder that, hey, you wanted to withhold judgment, and you're kind of being a little judgy.
I can tell you that it will improve any relationship in your life. It will restore peace. It will, where there's angst, it will actually diminish the fear, because you're not participating in it, because nobody judges when they're in fear. Nobody judges when they're in love. It's just pure acceptance and allowance and trust.
And joy and happiness.
And so we get to practice that in our relationships. We practice that in our conversation. I would like to invite everybody to please join us. And following this, we have our interactive Zoom session. And I would really love to hear from those who are going to join us. What did you learn about yourself in 2020?
Yeah.
And what are you unlearning? What aspect of the thought system of
would you like to unlearn?
Yeah. And we can bring that to conversation and share. We have it set up so that that it's a safe, confidential place to have sharing. You kind of went like that because there are no private thoughts.
Not really, but but it's a safe place, and we have a great time.
Yeah. So we'd love for you to join us. And I'd just love to say thanks again for introducing the concept of universal consciousness, which, for those who, you brought up a good point, for those who are, perhaps don't resonate with the term Christ or Christ consciousness, you can use the term universal consciousness.
Yeah.
And we don't really, it doesn't matter to us what we're going to call it.
Right. Words are just symbols of symbols.
But what matters is that we have an intention to begin to engage that awakened aspect of ourselves, and to know that it becomes our guidance system and helps us to traverse the way. Right. And then having an accountability partner is fun. It can be really annoying at times too. Ha ha ha. I'm never annoying.
Right.
Neither are you.
No,
right.
Of course not.
Right. But it can be so much fun too when we learn to lighten up and take things a little bit more light, humorously, because we're pretty funny human beings.
We are ridiculous.
Those who believe that we are human.
So also we want to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And let's all go forward into a 2020 that's given us some new tools to work with, and 2021 is going to have tremendous opportunities.
Yes.
Tremendous opportunities for everybody. So Happy New Year
Happy
to you
New
out
Year.
there.
Happy New Year,
Happy New
baby.
Year to you. Yes.
We're going to kiss.
Yeah, and you guys have a great weekend and celebrate New Year's. And God bless you. And we'll see you next year.
See you next year.
Right here at True Thought Spiritual Community. God bless you.
Bless you. Love.
Bye-bye.